Another very handy but is often overlooked technique in PowerPoint is shadow, which is also one of my favorite techniques. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you 3 types of shadow: surround, sided, and inner shadow. Note that shadow only works well on light background. So let's try the first one, surround, which means you have shadow around all sides of your shape. Let's try to do this together. First of all, draw a shape, like this. Right-click, go on to Format Shape, change the color to white, same as the background so you can see the shadow better later. Move on to the second tab, go to the shadow, the first drop down, go to presets and randomly choose a shadow effect, which, as expected, looks ugly. Transparency and blur are the 2 key values that you would want to adjust when it comes to shadow. For a natural shadow, you would set the transparency high, let's say push it up to 80 something percent in this case. For blur, push it much higher as well, say up to 50 something. And there you go, a soft, subtle shadow. So in order to have a subtle shadow around all sides, which is a surround shadow, you would want to ensure the transparency is high with a higher blur and, optional, a slightly larger size for a slightly more obvious effect. Let's see how shadow can elevate a slide. In here, I have 4 points with 4 icons. The alignments are quite neat, the elements are consistent, but overall it looks a bit plain. And this is after I've added the shadow. I have gray shadow behind the 4 big blocks and also a red shadow behind the triangular shapes to echo with the theme color. And this light looks much better, right? All you have done is added some shadow. Let's try to do it together. After you have drawn the shape, select the big block, change color to white same as the background, and then move on to the second tab, go on to shadow, pick a random presets, push up the transparency, and push up the blur until you're happy with it. And that's it for the bigger block. You can then copy and paste the style to the small one using the shortcut Ctrl-Shift-C and then Ctrl-Shift-V to paste the format. You can also change the shadow of the triangular shape to red to echo better with the theme color. If you want to copy the effect to other elements, you can just press Ctrl-Shift-C to copy the format and then Ctrl-Shift-V to paste the format so you don't have to do it over and over again. And this is an example on how shadow can enrich a slide in a subtle way. Another kind of shadow that I want to share with you is the sided shadow. Unlike the surround shadow that spreads evenly on all sides, sided shadow clusters on one side and gives a stronger sense of floating. The key is to use a comparatively lower transparency than the surround shadow so it looks more obvious, and a smaller size so the shadow doesn't look too big, and a farther distance so it looks more afloat. This is an example of a very strong sided shadow. You can see the shadow is very obvious and quite far from the subject, which means it has low transparency and far distance to give a strong sense of floating. Let's try to create this together. First of all, select the object and go on to the second tab, under shadow, choose a preset, select the one with shadow on the bottom. You will see a very solid shadow beneath your shape. First of all, increase the distance so that it is more far away from the object. Increase the blur so that it is more natural, and reduce the size. And when the size of the shadow reduces, it kind of hides behind the object, so you would want to further increase the distance such that it emerges from behind the shape. You can also push up the transparency a little bit so that it looks more natural. And there you go, a sided shadow behind the object. This kind of shadow is particularly helpful when you want to highlight something or to enhance the sense of space in your slide, and is commonly used in modern design. The third kind of shadow is inner shadow. It is comparatively less adopted but can be interesting to use. First, select the shape, Change the color to be the same as the background. Go on to the second tab and under Shadow, this time choose Inner Shadow. Again, the default effect is very rigid. So first push up the transparency so that it doesn't look so obvious, and then slightly increase the blur, not so high so that it doesn't spread too far, and keep a minimal distance. Fine-tune the other adjustments if you like, and there you go. You can use Inner Shadow to create interesting effects like this or this. So let's quickly recap. For a natural inner shadow, use high transparency, low blur, and small distance for the best result. So here are the 3 types of shadow that I like to use a lot. You can refer to these tips when you create the shadows in the future. In short, for surround shadow, you don't want it to look too obvious, and that's why you should have high transparency and high blur and maybe a slightly larger size such that the shadow appears from all sides behind the shape. A sided shadow, on the other hand, can be more obvious, and that's why you can have a slightly lower transparency and also a smaller size with a farther distance, such that it looks afloat and is casting a shadow on the floor. As for the inner shadow, you would want it to look subtle as well, so you would set a high transparency and a low blur with a small distance, such that the shadow appears around the rim but doesn't spread too far into the center. So I hope this helps you to understand shadow better and you can make full use of them in the future.